I think it is a universal human need to have someone who wonders where you are when you don't come home at night, by Margaret Mead.
This is the signature, below the signature on Annamarie Pluhar's emails, home sharing. This is of interest to us as a group. We're always interested in companionship. We investigate the need for housing and the need for finances. So this is going to be something our membership will be interested in. And I invited Annamarie, and I will just quickly introduce. She has a Master's of Divinity, and she's very well educated. There was a whole list of Vassar, of schools with impressive credentials, and has now become, I don't know if this was at what point, she's become an expert and advocate for this idea of home sharing. Annamarie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. And okay, so obviously the screenshot is of the Golden Girls, some of what you just saw. And one of the things that's true as I do this work is people will come up to me and say, oh yeah, I want a Golden Girls home. And I am thankful that there is such a metaphor in our society, that there's something about home sharing. But I'm actually a little bit worried about it because, of course, Golden Girls are 3 trained comedians with script writers. So what they show about living together is perhaps not as realistic as it might be. In this talk, let's see whether I can get my slides working. Yeah. What I want to do today, this afternoon, is to help you see the value of shared housing. I'm going to talk about the benefits, address some of what I think of as the usual fears and pitfalls, and to encourage more home sharing. So that's my purpose. How did I get going on this? Well, I once upon a time bought a house on purpose to live in shared housing because I'd already been doing it and I knew I liked it. That house is a 4-bedroom house I bought in Silver Spring, Maryland in 1995 and lived in it for 10 years. While I was living in, and had housemates. While I was living in that house, a friend was complaining about her finances. And I said, well, you have an asset, use it. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, rent a room in your house. She said, I don't know how to do that. And I went, well, I do. And then we had a conversation and she asked me whether I would coach her. And I realized that I could coach her and that I had developed a process for selecting somebody I could live with that made me feel safe and that was effective and efficient. And that is what I have documented in the book. And that is what I continue to work towards. In 2006, the book came out in 2011. In 2017, I formed Sharing Housing as a nonprofit. Meanwhile, I moved from Silver Spring, Maryland to southern Vermont. I'm talking to you from Dummerston, which is really close to Brattleboro, if any of you know that part, southeastern corner of Vermont. Our vision is that shared housing becomes a universally accepted living arrangement where individuals feel happy and safe and at peace with homemates, and that organizations encourage shared housing for their constituents. Homemate is our personal word. I hope that you will use it after this. Our definition of homemate is a person who you like and respect. Very important 2 pieces. Whose ways of living at home are compatible enough that everybody is comfortable. And that's the key. Are you compatible enough in how you use your home that you'll be comfortable? So why is this important? Well, we've got a huge number of people living alone, and it's increasing. And I think you all probably understand this without even having to talk about it very much. In November, the New York Times ran a piece on the front page of the Sunday Times about how many seniors were aging by themselves. Anybody see that piece? It was, when I started working on this, nobody was paying attention to it. COVID has changed this. Also, the numbers of us who are getting older, and I'm in the group, has made this a more and more critical problem. And look what happens as we age. So this chart shows share of households by age group. Single people are more likely to live alone as they get old. People are more likely to live alone as they get older for the obvious reasons. And we heard one testimonial just now, spouses die, friends die. And people end up just doing what they've always done before. They live in the house that they raise their children in, spouse is gone, and they use 2 rooms, but they have a whole house around them. Part of that article in the Times pointed out that a lot of seniors are stuck in houses that are bigger than they really want to be in, because they can't afford to move to something smaller with the way housing prices have gone. My answer, share housing. So before I keep going, I am going to show you what I hear as the usual objections and barriers. I'll just let you read them. Okay, when I do this in a room, a live present, this is live, but you know what I mean. I always ask, does anybody have another one? And nobody does. These seem to be the full set of the things that people say about why they couldn't share housing. I am not going to attack all of these. I just want you to know that I know them because I am so positive about the idea of living in shared housing. 5 benefits. And I'm going to explain each one of these or talk about each one of these. There's the financial help, companionship, sustainability, and something I call whole person health. So the first one is money. And it is honestly the first reason why people start sharing housing, why they even think about it. One slide to illustrate what the problem is in our society. On the blue bars are the costs to support yourself on average per month in this country, no mortgage, rent, and mortgage. And I know New York City prices are off the charts. But look what happens. So the average Social Security payment for men is $1,700. For females, it's almost $1,400. Nobody can accept, well, maybe if you don't have any mortgage and you're a male and you're making the average, you might be able to afford living, taking care of yourself. But average is average, right? That means there's a lot of people with a lot less. And I hear from people who say, I get $600 a month. I need to share housing. And I'm like, how do I help? The thing about, it's so interesting with shared housing. I mean, even if you were to charge a phenomenally cheap rent of $500 a month to somebody for space in an apartment or a home, that becomes $6,000 in a year, which is not chump change. And it can make the difference between scrimping and feeling comfortable, or it could make the difference to being able to take a fancy trip. There's lots of things you can do with the money if you have it. But one of the ones that's just, I'm going to write about, I think, there was a woman in New Jersey, was in the paper just last week, who torched her house. Did anybody see that one? And she torched her house at the end of a long protracted battle with her town because she couldn't pay her taxes. And the tax lien was sold to a big investment company. It was awful, ghastly all the way. But back up, when she knew she couldn't pay her taxes, why didn't she think about having somebody come in and help her pay her taxes, right? Why not? But people go into denial. And so I'm hoping that I'm helping to spread the word that home share is a way to manage difficult finances. It's the first reason. Another reason is for help and mutual assistance. And I put this on a continuum from convenience to life-threatening. And by convenience, I think about how easy it is when you have a housemate to say, will you feed the cat over the weekend when I go away, as opposed to trying to find a cat sitter? Or when you're sick, can you pick me up some chicken soup? That kind of a thing becomes very much easier when you've got somebody living in the house. So those are the convenience or getting locked out of the house. Lots of examples. Life-threatening emergency, the most obvious one is falling. 1 out of 4 seniors fall every year. People who start to fall more often. And 1 out of 5 falls ends up being a serious injury. Falling is dangerous as we get older. And it's good to have somebody around who knows that you've fallen. And obviously lots of devices that help people around that. But the other piece of help and mutual existence is, I think people who are in couples and families don't actually notice how much they are helped in just maintaining daily life, doing the little things, taking the trash out, taking out the compost, picking stuff up at shopping, whatever that might be. And the spotlight changed and it throwing me off. Okay. There's all kinds of little ways that you can get help over managing just daily life. Okay, enough on that. Next. This is the big one for me. It's the companionship piece. And the place I start is by showing you a tribal village. We all lived in tribes of 50 to 200 people for millennia. It is very, very recent in human existence that we live in even houses. And it turns out that we are wired to be connected, that literally our brains need social connection just as much as they need water and food. And there's a wonderful doctor who's done a lot of work on this about loneliness and so on. It turns out that when we are lonely, the pain that we feel strikes the same part of the brain as hunger or thirst. It's real. It's not something to be gotten over. It's the body, the psyche saying, do something to get connected. But we have trouble doing that because we think that, oh my God, I need to connect. I'm being left out. And once you start feeling left out, it's hard to say, let me in, let me in. And it's a childhood feeling. It's nobody wants to play with me, but it's very real. And it becomes a vicious cycle of disincentive for being connected to others, which can lead to a chronic loneliness. And the chronic loneliness is, yeah. Why doesn't it say lonely? There it is. Okay. The chronic loneliness, we know, has a whole bunch of really negative stuff. Now, everybody who is here is not in this bucket because you're here. You're making efforts to be connected to others. But for chronic loneliness, we know that executive function goes bad, that they can't experience, that people who are chronically lonely do not notice good things happening to them. They are more likely to expect negative stuff. They drink more, they eat fatty foods. They cost chronic loneliness and loneliness, social isolation. They're all sort of connected to each other, and there are big fights about how you define each one of those. AARP did a study and found out that loneliness is costing Medicare $6.7 billion a year. Loneliness is also thought to create a higher risk of early mortality than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we know it's a problem. And the thing that's so interesting for me is that it really wasn't that long ago that people lived together. I use Downton Abbey as an example. It's a story, of course, but it is a story because they're housemates. They're living under a roof together. 2 classes, yes, but the point is that it really wasn't very long ago that people routinely boarded. Ministers boarded, rabbis boarded, apprentices boarded, teachers boarded, widows had boarding houses. Boarding was something that people did as a natural way to manage life. And we have in post-World War II done, oh no, I'm ahead of myself. We have created a culture where we think we're supposed to take care of ourselves, that we're the cowboy on the prairie, self-reliant and independent. And I would add, certainly true for my generation, that being in our 20s and the 70s with feminism, it was, we can take care of ourselves. You know, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. Remember that one? So we've developed a culture where people are living alone, and it's not good for us, is what I think about that. This is the picture I thought I was headed for. Lots of this around the country, not so much in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn and New York has the potential for this kind of building. And many of those have turned into what people are calling NORCs, or naturally occurring retirement communities. Because of course, if you are friends with your neighbors, if you've known your neighbors forever, you can go in and out of each other's houses. You have the kind of companionship that I want people to have with home sharing, right? So companionship's very important. Oh, and the other thing to say is, we as a society, we have made it really hard to have spontaneous social interactions. We don't have what are called middle places. People meet people at work, have people at home. Where do you go if you just want to be with people? In summertime, you can go to the park. And New York is better than a lot of other parts of the country, but it is really incredible. And the other thing we've done, nobody drops in on anybody anymore. And in fact, my own sister will text me to make a date to have a phone conversation. We've created these barriers to being connected to each other. All right. Next benefit is sustainability. Obviously, when people are living together, they don't need 2 crock pots, 2 toasters, 2 coffee machines, et cetera, 2 heating systems, all of that. Corporate America likes to have people living by themselves. Much more profitable for them. Think about that. Okay, and then my last benefit is what I call whole person health. And what this means to me is that I believe we exist to give and to receive, to have this reciprocity as part of our daily existence, and that it feels good to give and to receive. Happens naturally in couples, happens naturally in families, doing it all the time. But if you don't have people nearby in a way to do that, I believe we shrivel up, that our souls lack nourishment, and we get sad. And I I think a lot of the anger that we're seeing in our country right now has to do with the amount of loneliness people experience through COVID, and they haven't recouped the connections, the social connections that make us feel good. They make us feel good because it's natural. It's what we want. Okay, so those are my high-level view: financial help, companionship, sustainability, and whole person health. And I'm going to remind you that my definition of a homemate is a person who you like and respect, whose ways of living are compatible enough that you are comfortable living together. And that's the important piece of doing the selection process, is figuring out whether you like and respect each other, but also if you're compatible enough. So Deb and Sharon are two housemates, homemates now. So I think homemate is a mature housemate relationship. I don't think it happens right away. It happens as you get to know each other. They found each other through friends, networks of things. Sharon, who's in the purple, has Parkinson's and realized that she couldn't continue to live by herself, that she was going to need help. And I don't think of home share as a caretaking thing. Necessarily. These are unusual women. Deb, it turned out, was going, I got to get out of debt. How do I figure out how to get out of debt? And she said, maybe I can find a place to live where I can exchange work for rent. They got together 5 years ago. There's more story there, but they love their arrangement so much and how much it's changed their lives for the better that they are actively working on developing home share in Tucson, Arizona. And then I have a whole bunch of other people I have interviewed over years who are sharing housing. And we don't have time for me to tell you all these stories. I will tell you that the three women feeding a bear live together outside of Pittsburgh in the house that's owned by the woman in the black jacket on the left. The two women on the upper right-hand corner started living together, doing internships out of nursing school, and they kind of never, ever got married. And they were like, at some point, they said, you know, this is really stupid. We're paying rent. And so they bought a condo together. And the blog post I wrote for them is titled "In the Meantime," because they always thought that there would be somebody special for them, but it hasn't happened yet. The lower right-hand corner are two families, a brother and a sister. Their spouses and their children all live together and have raised their families together for 20 plus years here in Brattleboro. Quick stories. People ask me about, like, how do you think about living with somebody? What does it take? And it's really kind of simple and complicated, right? So I always say that a person who is a good housemate candidate has to be able to live by the golden rule. Very basic. You have to be willing to compromise and to give something up. Now, you've already done all the research and all the screening for compatibility. So you're not giving up anything that's really important, but you have to be able to do some shifting to make it work for everybody. The second principle is what I call do it while it's easy, which is to say, speak up before something becomes a big deal. And there's lots of stories about people thinking it's going to be a big deal and the other person goes, oh, okay, fine, I'll take care of that. So always, 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 your room or your rooms are your own. This is a key principle for living in shared housing. That's how you maintain privacy. And I do think that when space is not an issue, most people would be happy to have a bedroom, a sitting room, and a bathroom, and then they could share common space. Now, New York City is a little difficult around that, but and then my last principle is really more for people younger, but it's also an important one, and so I don't leave it off the list, which is the incest taboo. When you live with your housemate is your housemate is your housemate and is never to be anything other. And I will say this is for younger people. every now and then I'll get an email. Oh, we sort of did the thing one night and now I don't know what to do when I see him in the morning and now he's dating other people. It's a guaranteed way to lose a housemate. So, and I will tell you that I have a friend / person who is actually in her early 60s and moved in with a guy sharing a house in Arizona. And she told me, she said, I made myself speak up and say that we were going to have an incest taboo during the conversation, during our talking. He agreed. She said, it was so helpful the first couple of weeks because I could feel that tension and I would go, no. And she said, I'm so glad it's gone. So, babies, they're the only ones who like change. Nobody likes to move. Nobody likes change. But it is in our interest to make changes before they're foisted upon us. So how does things happen? How do you get to home share? Well, it so happens that New York City has a really good home share program. It's the New York Foundation for Senior Citizens has a home share program. There are programs that do online matching, like Silver Nest or Nesterly. And then there's Our Way, sharing housing, what I'm promoting. Because what I believe is that adults have agency, and adults who have made other critical decisions in their lives, like where to live, what jobs to have, whether to be married, whether not to be married, all of that, also want to make the decision about who they might live with. This picture is of Jean, Karen, and Louise, who for 10 years owned a house together. They were friends and they had traveled together and they joke about, when we retire, we should live together. And then one day one of them said, why are we waiting? And one thing led to another, and they lived in that house for 10 years, and then life changed for them, and they no longer all live together. So what I think is that there are people who can do home share themselves. They're DIY folks, do it yourself. They've just, like I was for years, yeah. And I think there's somebody on here who has said she always had lodgers. She's a DIY. There are other people who are high in vulnerability, low in independence. They really want matching programs. They want somebody to help hold their hand and take them through the program. But I believe that there are a lot of people who belong in the middle, who, if they knew how to select somebody that they could live with, and they went through a careful process with guidance about that process, can do it themselves. So that is what we are up to. Our website, sharinghousing.com, has my book, has workbook, an interviewing guide. We have 2 courses, online courses, 5 Key Benefits, which is free. It's more detailed than what I just did fast. Sharing Housing 101 is actually where you learn the process. If you don't, the book also has the process. And it so happens that I'm offering Discovering Shared Housing again in April this year, Thursday. I haven't offered this in 2 years, but I'm ready to do it again. And that's a little, this is what our website looks like. So, and I think Dora had just put in the links to my various different things. Yep, I see them there. And so with that, I close with the same quote we started with. Thank you so much. I'll stop the share.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are questions, but before you can very quickly, I see your hand, Irene. Let me just start off. There were when we spoke, you mentioned some very, very practical things that I think might be helpful. Just that in Vermont, the government helps you with, like, for example, breaking one room into 2 rooms, getting 2 refrigerators. Like, can you just highlight what are the most important things that people might do when they decide to turn their apartment into a 2-person apartment? A lot of us live in apartments here.
Yeah, so what you are remembering is that we have a program started here in Vermont, we're calling SHIFT, Shared Housing Incentives for Taking Action. And what we are doing is consulting with people who want to share housing about what they might be able to do to make their house more comfortable. And some of the things I think of are a bigger fridge, or hiring an organizer to help clear out a room because it feels overwhelming, or maybe even putting up a wall, moving a door to create a little bit more privacy. It depends very much on the situation, what's the right kind of thing to do to make